My dear friends, we continue with my game against Baklan, and probably this will be the last endgame given on this DVD. The game was played in 2004, as you will have noticed also from this DVD. It was a good year for me, and also many good endgames had been won. And here, in this particular position, you see that Baklan was in time trouble and in deep trouble, because I have two bishops and very active position, and I was actually quite confident that I am winning this. But on the other hand, Black found an amazing resource. He found Queen F8, and this move somehow looks impossible, but Black uses the fact that White's king is vulnerable on G1, and that after Queen takes D7, Queen C5, King H2, Queen takes C4, he's just in time to protect everything. And this probably means that White is forced to go into the ending Queen F8, Knight F8. Now what can we say about this ending? White is pawn down, but on the other hand he has two mighty bishops, and it seems that he's winning the A pawn and should actually proceed to win the game without any problems. But Black, he finds, still in time trouble, he finds a very nice way to eliminate my A pawn, which came certainly as some surprise to me. He plays bishop E6, and now I discovered that if I take bishop E6, knight E6, bishop takes A5, then he goes knight C5 and just takes my pawn on A4, and I cannot do anything against it. So I kept my bishops. I went bishop D3, attacking A5, also preparing bishop C2 to protect A4, but here unfortunately he goes bishop B3, just relinquishing the pawns A5, F5, but taking a very important pawn on A4, after which I am losing quite some serious part of my advantage. So here I could probably take bishop F5, but then after King G8, bishop A5, bishop takes A4. The position is very difficult to win. Okay, I have two bishops, some advantage, but there is material balance, and it is unclear that my advantage will be sufficient. So I still found a small trick in this position. I took bishop takes A5, and the trick is that if he plays bishop A4, then I go bishop B4, attacking the knight, and surprisingly there is no good way to defend this knight, because after knight E6, knight D7, bishop F5 will happen, and I will win the knight, and after King G8, bishop C4 check. That's why it is important not to have taken on F5 earlier. So, but after bishop A5, my opponent remains alert and plays G6. Now you see a seemingly simple position, but many complex details to take care of. Also after G6, it almost looks like White is winning with bishop B4, followed by A5. But also against this, my opponent had something prepared. He goes C5, bishop C5, knight E6, attacks A4 and attacks C5, and I'm losing my passed pawn, and also probably with it hopes to win the game. So after G6, I took HG6, King G6, and I had to admit that I'm losing my passed pawn on A4, play G4, bishop A4, bishop takes F5. Now this ending, it should be noted that White has very few resources left, only two pawns and two bishops. On the other hand, Black's task is also not so easy, because the pawn H6 is weak, and also he will have to defend probably for the rest of the game against two bishops. Now, analyzing games like this is very difficult. It is always difficult to prove when the draw was missed and when the draw could have been made, because there are no exact evaluations here, no exact lines, but it will be useful for you to see how the opponents proceeded. So Black undoubtedly has to keep his king close to his H6 pawn, otherwise it will be lost very quickly. So Black goes to g7, and now white just tries to maximally improve the position of his pieces. So the king goes to h4, trying to win this pawn on h6, but after knight d4, also bishop f7 check is there, and basically I am not succeeding. Play bishop e4, c5, and bishop f4. You see, I try to work with ideas like bishop d6 or bishop e5 followed by f4, and surprisingly enough, even with such limited forces, sometimes it is possible to attack the king successfully. That is, after bishop f4, bishop e5, king h5, the pawn on h6, black might get into trouble, so he has to pay close attention to what is going on. Plays bishop d1, bishop e5, king f7. Basically, black found probably the only way to stay alive. Now he's tying me to the defense of the pawn on f3, and now after the move f4, knight f3 would be a draw. So, okay, I have to go back. King g3, but no great damage done. Black returns bishop b3. So considering this position, I was thinking that okay, I tried to go forward, but I did not succeed, probably because the black's knight on d4 is excellently placed, and attacking on f3 doesn't allow me to improve my position. So I started by attacking the pawn on c5, and in fact I tried to make it move, because after the move like c4, I can go back bishop e5, then followed by bishop d5, and then it seems that in fact by moving the pawn, black lost a bit of coordination. But my opponent went knight e2 check, king f2, knight c3. My opponent is constantly speculating on the fact that whenever the bishop e4 will be exchanged, it will be a draw, so I certainly cannot allow this. I play bishop f5 and c4, bishop f4. You see, with every move, white tries to create certain threats. Now h6 is hanging, king g7 is impossible because of bishop e5, but my opponent is still very alert, plays knight d1, king e1, king g7. So this somehow a sort of setup black found. It seems that now it is difficult to attack the knight on d1, and difficult for white to proceed. On the other hand, also the knight on d1 is not so greatly placed unless it manages to get out, unless it manages to go to b2, d3 also. So I start by going bishop e5, king f7, bishop d4. You see, now the knight is cut off, and at some point c3 will be forced. Otherwise, white is threatening to go at some point f4 and maybe win this unlucky knight on d1. So black goes c3. Now it is interesting to note that although black is advancing his passed pawn, with every advance it is becoming weaker and weaker. That is because white has control of the whole board. Now also the knight on d1 is unluckily placed, so white goes king e2. Now at some point c2 would immediately lose to king d2, and then the white bishop on d4 would dominate the black knight on d1, and after bishop c2, and simply black would be collapsing. So after king e2, he still went king f8, and after this I was able to take another important square from black king by playing bishop g6. Now king f7 is no longer possible, and black is slowly running out of reasonable moves. And here black somehow, probably black still could have stood by playing bishop a4, but then I activate my pawns, probably bring the pawn to f6 and create the mating threats. So you see, by constantly keeping the position active, by generating threats, two bishops are often able to annoy the opponent's defense, even in what is probably objectively a drawn position. Here my opponent played bishop d5, hoping for king takes d1, bishop f3, and bishop takes g4. But after bishop d5, a simple bishop c2. Now at b2, bishop c3 wins the material, and black unfortunately has to admit that his strategy was a failure, that in fact he just lost the c-pawn, and now it will be just torture without relief. There is this pawn on h6, it is hanging, and okay, nothing he can do about it. So He goes knight c4, I return to g6. It's important to keep the king a bit further from the pawn on h6. And after king g8, okay, the same strategy, but just I return to h4, and basically I play just like I played when he had the c pawn, but he doesn't have it anymore. So I improved my position, everything forward. Bishop f6, bishop d1, king h5, bishop f3. So this was somehow the last defensive setup he had found. The bishop is tying to the pawn on g4, so I cannot win the pawn on h6. And this is basically the last problem I had to take care of in this game. So I played bishop f5. Now I'm creating ideas like bishop e6, king g6. He went knight d6, played bishop d3, king f7, bishop e5, bishop g6, king f8. You see he's basically driven further and further back, but it is still somehow not immediately apparent how am I winning, because if I take king h6 after bishop g4, still it might not be easy to win this. But in fact he cannot do so much. I play bishop c3, and now at some point I am threatening to play bishop b4 check and win this knight on e8, and now it is actually finally completely lost for black, because if he goes knight g7, I am finally able to take on h6 and attack the knight at the same time. And if he tries something else, like in the game he went king e7, bishop b4 check, king d8, bishop c3, king e7, I went bishop f5. Now I defend the pawn on g4 and threaten to take on h6. He tried the last move, knight d6, but then after bishop b4 you see the complete domination of white's pieces. Now the knight is pinned, cannot move and cannot be unpinned, and white just takes on h6 and just queens the pawn, and nothing will be able to prevent this. This was, in my opinion, a very good endgame, very good demonstration of the strengths of two bishops even in very simple positions. You saw that although white did not have any major threats, just by keeping the pressure, playing around and creating a lot of tricks, white was able to win this game against a very good opposition. And with this example, I believe that enough has been done for this particular DVD. We have seen many endgames, and I think it is time to proceed for a traditional wrap-up of the material we studied. And I guess that for today of chess pieces we have seen enough.